top White House advisor, economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, says he hopes the economy can reopen in the next 4 to 8 weeks. Out front now, Kudlow's predecessor, Gary Cohn, the former director of the National Economic Council under President Trump. And Gary, I really appreciate your taking the time. So I just want to start off on this crucial point, which I know so many are talking about, as you know, we all hope that these numbers start to plateau and this country starts to come out of this. 4 to 8 weeks to reopen the economy. Do you think that is even possible?
Look, Erin, we're all hoping for the best here. We hope that the social distancing is working. We hope we've seen the worst, and it will take some time to open the economy. I think we're going to have to go through a very incremental approach in reopening the economy. I think it's going to be different city by city, state by state, and county by county. So yes, it could take a couple months to get back to somewhat of a more normalized economic picture in the United States.
So, you know, obviously, and when you say somewhat of a more normalized, you know, I mean, obviously there could still be a lot of things I would presume in that aren't happening, like large sporting events or conferences, big events like that. All right. One of the ways, though, as you know, Gary, we've all been hearing a lot about this, to potentially reopen the economy is this idea of an antibody test. And, you know, I've talked to people who make those tests. They say they're incredibly cheap to make. You could find out who's had the virus and is now healthy. Assuming that they can't get it again, they could potentially return to the workforce. You know, Citigroup had an analysis, I don't know if you saw it, but they said 95% of working age Americans could get that antibody test by the end of next month. There's a lot of variables in this, but do you think antibody testing is an important part of all this or not?
Absolutely. I think testing is imperative to be part of the formula of reopening the economy. We're going to need to know exactly where people stand, what people can do what. We don't want to put anyone in harm's way. The most important thing of reopening the economy is not to have a major relapse. So if we know those people with antibodies, we know where they can fit into the reopening of the economy. We know people without antibodies, we're going to have to put them in a different position. So I think the testing is going to continue to be very important as we try and do a meticulous and very thoughtful job of this reopening of our economy.
So, you know, to this point, I don't know if you saw, you know, Iceland did this random testing, and obviously it's a small country. They were able to do it, but they did random testing to see how many people had the virus. They were able to test 5% of their population. One of the things they found out was that only 1% of those they actually tested had the coronavirus. Now, that's just, you know, their sampling and one country. But I asked this, Gary, because it raises the point that what if you did an antibody test? And what if it doesn't show 80% of Americans had it? What if it shows only 5 or 10? Does that dramatically change the game on reopening the economy?
Look, we need to know that. That's an important piece of data. And yes, it will have an impact on how we open and how we think about reopen the economy. So look, I guess if we're lucky enough that a lot of people have the antibodies, we'll know what the N was. We'll actually know what the fatality rate was. We'll know what the potency of the coronavirus was. But B, we'll really be able to take a more aggressive approach if we know there are a lot of people with antibodies around. If there are fewer and fewer antibodies in the system, we're going to have to be much more methodical in the way we think of reopening the economy. And we'll have to devise a very specific plan, knowing that at any given day, we would potentially have to change the way we're thinking about it, because if the disease reappears at any point, we're going to have to change the way we're thinking about it, change the way the plan goes, and be very adaptable. I think the antibody testing allows us to be a little bit more straightforward in our planning, and without antibodies, we're going to have to be a lot more adaptable, and it's going to be a lot more fluid.
So I think it's really interesting how you think through that. So today, you know, the president, I don't know if you saw the briefing, right, but obviously you heard about these memos that Peter Navarro had put out there warning about, you know, possible death toll and the danger coronavirus could pose to the U.S., that it could be a pandemic, doing so back in January. Obviously, the president said he had not seen those specific memos at the time. Gary, we do know that the intelligence community was warning about the seriousness of the virus back in January, and that Alex Azar, the HHS secretary, had said last year that the thing that keeps him up at night was pandemic flu. Now, you know President Trump, and you have obviously dealt with him extensively. Why didn't he hear some of those things, whether it was from Azar or the intelligence community? Why didn't he hear any of this earlier?
Erin, I don't know. Look, I have been out of the White House for almost 2 years right now, and I am not privy to the discussion that was going on in the White House or the memos or the existence of the memos or not. So look, I'm not in a position to comment on what is going on there. I think there's going to be plenty of time for us to do a post-mortem on what happened, what memos were written, what memos were not written. Right now, I think it's so much more important that we figure out how to continue to conquer this disease. And look, I applaud the American public for what they've done, our social distancing. You're reporting that 97% of people are literally staying at home, and it's having a dramatic effect. And that's great, because that is going to allow us to renormalize the economy sooner than many of us may have thought just a few weeks ago.
So when you talk about what to do to beat this, the United States right now obviously has already spent trillions, and we anticipate there will be much more spent, right, to fight the virus, economic stimulus, whatever form that is taking already, obviously, and will take in the future. So right now, there's been no concern at all about the cost of doing that. And frankly, the cost of borrowing and global desire to have dollars has made it such that it's not an expensive thing to do right now. But it is going to explode the national debt. You have states that are going to be in completely dire situations, including the one that you and I are sitting in tonight. Is there a danger of spending too much, and that not far out, this country could have a very, very big issue because of all of that?
Right now, there is no danger. The danger would be to spend too little. So when we look at the payroll replacement plan or the payroll protection plan that we've got in place, we have no choice but to do that. We need to allow American citizens to be able to put food on their table and buy the drugs that they need to buy to make sure they are healthy and their families are healthy. Whatever that costs right now, it's going to cost that. We will have plenty of time to figure out how to pay for this. Look, this is going to be a big wake-up call for Congress. We're going to actually have to sit down when this is over and go through the entire budget of the United States and reconcile how we spend money. And we're going to have to go through our tax system, and we're going to have to reevaluate how we raise revenue in this country. And we're going to have to say, look, going forward, we know that at any given moment, we may have to be in a position to spend $3 to $5 trillion on a pandemic or some other type of crisis. And we have to put our financial house in order to be able to do that. And I hope that our politicians do that. And if they don't, we should elect politicians that are willing to do that.
All right, Gary Cohn, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much tonight.
Thank you, Erin, for having me.